Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome to the B2B Growth Show, the human to human segment. I am Carlos Hidalgo, CEO and founder of Vism CX, and also author of the newly published book, The Un-American Dream. Today I have with me a woman who has many talents, is known for many things, and quite honestly is one of my favorite people that I've ever had the opportunity to work with. And so, Katie Martell, welcome to the B2B Growth Show.
Wow. Thanks, Carlos. Glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, I know you're busy, so I really do thank you for the time. And I know our guests are going to be in for a treat just hearing you. So before we go any further, tell us who Katie Martell is.
I love that this is the human to human segment of the podcast. Allegedly, you and I are both human as well. But this is
That's
a great...
what I'm identifying as today, yes.
It's most days. No, it's great to be here. This is a really fun podcast. You and then the team do a great job. So thanks for having me. Quick summary about me. I have been in marketing all of my career, but it's been uniquely focused on marketing to marketers from a variety of angles. I've worked both vendor side at data services companies. I've worked at PR firms selling to marketers, but helping them launch businesses. A lot of startup background, had my own startup for a while, so an entrepreneurial adventure. And that was also a marketing tech brand that sold, into the marketing world. Since about 2016 or so, I've been independent, which has given me a different perspective on marketing from someone who can now be a bit of I'll say skeptic, a bit of a truth teller. I have the amazing opportunity to speak all over the world, actually, about what we do as marketers and really enjoy this kind of freedom to call BS on the industry while hopefully repeating back to marketers how they can get better. So things like this really help do that. So I appreciate the platform.
Absolutely. So one of the ways you describe yourself is an unapologetic truth teller. And you just said something about calling BS on what you see in the industry. And as human beings, we don't often receive that really well. When someone calls BS on either our work or something we're doing. So how does that go over? How do you approach that with your clients or even perhaps colleagues or vendors you may work with, just from a human perspective?
I feel like BS is the most important part of creating change. We really can't create positive change in our own lives, important change in the industries, or change in, say, the markets that we're trying to create buyer change in, unless we're honest about the way things are. So for me, I look at what we call BS as simply hard truths, exceptional truths about the industry, about ourselves. And like I said, having the amazing freedom of being independent gives me personally this kind of freedom to call out the entire industry. And I'll give you an example of where the nickname came from. It's not a self-attributed nickname. My good old colleague, he's not old, it was a long time ago, Andrew from Aberdeen Group, actually, when I was working there during a time of pivot, he called me an unapologetic marketing truth teller in response to an article that I had, honestly, Carlos, just banged out one night, 2:00 in the morning. I was watching TV and I noticed that a few ad campaigns that I was seeing were, all using the tropes of feminism, breaking the glass ceiling, and an ad with two women in a bathroom talking about equal pay, and, things that on the surface seemed really encouraging and positive. And me being me and watching, TV late at night, I started to Google some of these brands, and I started to notice behind the scenes really poor behavior by these companies. I'm talking lawsuits. I'm talking other brands being marketed at the same time that were completely misogynistic, absolutely hypocritical activity from the same brands that were starting to profit from these very expensive, although I don't know how expensive 2 a.m. ad buys are. And I just wrote an article called The Illusion of Progress That We Were Making as an Industry Marketing to Women. Now we're using feminism in our ads, but how we're behaving as a company hasn't caught up. So the article went a little bit gangbusters. It was right around International Women's Day every single year that more and more examples started to come out. And I have just been on this beat, calling out brands for what is essentially hypocritical femvertising. And it not only applies to women, it now applies to pandering to LGBTQ consumers. Insert value, insert minority here, and there's a brand exploiting it for their own gain. So this is something that just became a passion project for me, and it's gotten incredible feedback because I believe in what I'm seeing. Other people, consumers, employees, and marketers are all looking for, again, this permission to tell the truth, or as you call it, call out BS.
Well, I love that example. If you've not read those articles by Katie, I highly suggest it because I have read them and they are incredibly insightful, incredibly thought out. And I think one of the things I appreciate the most about you, Katie, is you stay in the facts. And I think in our society, it's so easy to attack a person or persons versus behavior. And I love that you just call out the behavior.
The intention is there. I mean, marketers inherently want to do good by their buyers, by their brands. This is why I write about it, because there is, and there are some really wonderful examples of organizations and campaigns that do a great job living up to the values. They're not just lip service. They're not just cheap talk. And those, I believe, are great examples that allow brands to connect with buyers on a value-based level, which everybody wants to build trust, to differentiate, to connect, to increase the effectiveness of the campaigns, the virality of them. People love to share these. So I believe inherently it's a positive intention. The issue is we get tripped up falling for industry tricks. We get tripped up thinking that because everyone else does it, our brand is appropriate for it.
Yeah. So when I hear you talk about the brands that are manipulating or the brands that are using feminism or LGBTQ for their own benefit, the word that keeps circling around in my mind is authenticity. And I have written a lot about being authentic and being, dare I say, vulnerable. So if you're a marketer and you're saying, I want my brand to be authentic, I don't want to exploit something simply to sell more product or service, where does someone start, whether they're a manager, a vice president, CMO, or somebody who's just down in the trenches writing copy? How does that authenticity start if I already know the hard truth is we're not living up to what we're putting out into the marketplace?
Well, that's the key. I feel like there's layers of authenticity that have to be aligned in order for a brand to be seen as one that is honest and trustworthy, which I think every brand knows is the most important thing to achieve today. And I also think most brands are working from a place of disconnect. They're working from a place of actually they're walking into a situation being untrusted from the get-go, meaning that marketing and anyone responsible for the perception of the brand almost has to work overtime, right, to earn that kind of trust, just to get back to square one with buyers who are just inherently skeptical today. So if I'm a copywriter, if I'm a marketer sitting there wondering which messages or which narratives, right, are appropriate to kind of, tap into, what are the zeitgeists that are right for a brand like ours to really own. The three layers I would look at start with what matters to buyers, obviously, but I think overlooked, what matters to and what we can live up to with our own corporate culture, with our own standards. What I mean by that is how we hire, how we treat employees. For example, if you're going to use femvertising, which is using feminism in advertising, well, you better have women on your executive team, and you better have equal pay transparency, and you better employ women throughout the organization. You better create things like strong family leave programs. Don't claim to be feminist unless you are acting with the ideals of
Right.
equality in mind. It also extends to who you choose to do business with. Don't claim to be a feminist minded organization if you don't mandate things like supplier diversity. There are simple steps you can take as a business to actually align with the values that you want to use publicly. It's kind of a litmus test that you can run to see whether or not this is a campaign or, again, a narrative you should tap into. And then I would look at not only what's important to buyers, what are the practices of the organization, what are the values of the employees? So we saw, this is where the lines are really starting to blur. We saw in Boston here, the Wayfair walkout. Are you familiar? And I'm sure if anyone's listening who's not familiar, 500 or so, and don't quote me on that, but hundreds of employees of the online furniture retailer Wayfair, which is headquartered here in Boston, beautiful facilities right downtown, they walked out. They staged a protest where they very, very visibly walked out of the organization because they were protesting the company's sale of beds down to border center detention facilities. And what really staged and created the walkout was not the simple sale and they were trying to make a point. There was an internal moment where the company was looking to its leadership to define the values of the organization and who that organization would do business with. And they were so disappointed. The employees were so disappointed by the executive team's response or lack thereof of clear delineations and clear values, that's what created the walkout, which got nationwide, probably global press. And so this value alignment thing is important because it affects organizations at every single level of their stakeholders, customers, employees, and everyone that they do business with from a partner perspective.
Yeah, and I think that to me makes so much sense, right? Do we live up to it? Because as the old adage says, the actions speak louder than words. You touched on something as well, which I think is really important, and then you said it, and it's often overlooked, which I agree with, is this: what matters to our buyers? What matters to our consumers? Why, first of all, why do you think that is so overlooked in today's marketing?
I think that most companies are inherently inside out organizations. And what I mean by that is every organization that you've ever worked for, think about when you've started at that company, think about the types of training that you receive. What's the first thing that they teach you? They teach you about internal culture. They teach you about internal policies. They teach you about the products you're going to go market and bring to market. They show you the sales process. It rarely, and in most organizations, very late in that process, do you get a chance to go and understand the buyer and go in and live a life, live a day in their life. I feel like we throw around the word empathy like it's going out of style. It's becoming so important because it's becoming the thing that separate great brands from mediocre brands. It's this actual internal motion to allow everybody in the company, especially in marketing, to understand buyers. And again, we throw that out like it's the easiest thing in the world. Hey, why don't you go create some personas, slap them up in a PDF document, right? Put it up on the internal SharePoint. Boom, you're a customer-centric organization. No way. This is actually something that is a muscle that needs to be worked, needs to be practiced. There's one organization that does it really well. It's Toast, another Boston. I'm gonna call out Boston-based brands. You go, guys.
Right. This is a commercial for the Boston-based companies. I love it.
We want your investment. Come start a company here. Sources you need. Toast is a point of sale technology company. They actually sell to restaurants, and they're one of the fastest growing companies here in Boston. I was actually just on a panel with one of their senior product marketing leaders, Kelly Easton, and Kelly shared that they have this amazing internal process called, I think they call it empathy immersion, which is a cool name for what is essentially just allowing everybody in the company to spend a day in the life of a restaurant owner so that the people that are building technology, servicing that tech, marketing and selling that tech can all understand what is actually going on in the person's life that they have to sell to. These are not very tech savvy people. These are very busy individuals. It's difficult to get to them. this is part of why the company is doing so well. They've baked a process that is inherently not scalable. It is expensive. It is a distraction from the core competency, but it's so critical to everybody doing their job correctly. That's why they're able to succeed. They're baked into knowing inherently what matters to the buyer.
Yeah, and I think that is, to me, that gets back to that human element. And one of the things I've seen, and I know you and I have spoken about a little bit, is B2B marketing has become so sterile and so generic. And yes, we should be talking about it. I believe, and I'm curious to your thought on this. I believe when we're marketing our products or services, we should be talking about, what's important to them in terms of their jobs. But is there also a place to say, hey, we're going out to people who might have had really crappy commutes into work today, are trying to live with work-life balance, are fearful on downsizing? Do those literally, those really personal feelings, do those also have a role in B2B marketing and addressing those?
No, none at all. Just kidding. I feel like I have a resource that I'd like to recommend to anyone listening. It's from Harvard Business Review and Bain and Company. And it's called The B2B Elements of Value. And you can Google just B2B Elements of Value. You can find the article. It's ungated, it's free, but it is the best, I think, scientific and just exercise that I've ever seen in clarifying why a B2B buyer, which don't forget is a human, makes a purchase decision, what they actually value. And the way that the research is organized is in terms of, it's kind of in the same as like Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Mhm.
baseline needs like shelter, food, water at the bottom. In B2B, those elements of value are functional value. Things like, will this reduce my costs? Or is this an acceptable price? Does it scale? Which are typically things that I would say most B2B companies include in their marketing messaging. And
Yes.
unfortunately, many stop at that is the level at which they end their journey up this pyramid of value. What the research found and what you and I know to be true just from working with B2B brands our whole careers is that the magic happens when you're able to move beyond these very functional levels and levers of value. Things like, and increasingly the research found they're more individual based and they're more inspirational in nature. For example, to your point, B2B buyers are buying based on very personal value drivers. Will this give me a chance to grow in my career? For example, will it improve my marketability as an individual? We see this all the time, for example, with marketing operations, software, and services. The marketing operations role, those individuals are some of the most amazing, most pioneering types of people because the industry is being created as they're working. And so vendors that do well in this space elevate those buyers. Marketo,
Yeah.
for example, right, who's a disclaimer, partner of mine, they'll elevate the individuals in this community in their marketing nation, give them opportunities to connect, give them education, give them awards to showcase what good looks like and to showcase peer to peer what works. That's a marketability play. That's reputational assurance. That's network expansion. Those career focused value statements that are so critical to buyers. That's why people are so loyal to a marketing operations technology. It's a piece of software, and yet people are defining their careers based on it. So that's one example. I think more broadly, at the very top of this pyramid, you'll see are things like hope, vision, and social responsibility. These are what they call inspirational value elements. These are the things that I really think separate incredible brands from average vendors. If you can give a buyer hope that despite the very changing nature of their industry, I think about IT buyers, for example, security type professionals. Those people are inundated with high risk, high pressure, tons of stress. If you're a vendor and you can give them hope, you can give them a clear vision for the future that's going to, again, allow them to win, you've got it. Yeah, your product might be the right price. It might meet all the specifications, but if you're going to differentiate, earn trust, and win, you've got to go up this pyramid. So for B2B elements of value, check it out. You're going to print it out. You're going to hang it on your cubicle. You're welcome. Bain and Company, free promotion.
And it's interesting, and that's not too unlike what I heard from CEB that showed some of the impediments to purchase for buyers is a fear that if they make the wrong decision, they're going to lose their job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we forget that, again, that human emotion that really does go into not just buying, just into every day when you walk into your office, or sit down at your chair. Of There's so much raw human emotion that goes into who we're marketing to and who we're trying to get the attention of. And so I do want to shift the discussion to attention, because and everybody talks about the attention economy. I call it the distracted economy, where we just live in a constant state of distraction. So if I'm drinking the Kool-Aid now as a listener, I'm going, yes, we're going to do the hard work, spend the money, put the investment of time and money and resources into knowing our customers. How in hell do you get someone's attention? Because we're so distracted all the time, and we've got a million messages thrown at us on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I mean, it's half the battle. I always say that attention is only one half of the fight, because once you have that attention, it's not just about keeping it, but it's about getting their attention and then allowing the buyer to actually trust what it is you're saying. I mean, I think to answer your question, I mean, I wish I was an easy answer to how do you get attention. It's going to be different for every buyer on the call, different channels, but the point is, I think that we have to remember that we don't market in a bubble. We talk a lot about the word noise. We talk a lot about breaking through the clutter, but the clutter is not just the other vendors in your space that are also marketing and selling the same things. The clutter is actually a lot broader than that. We live in what I think it was Pew Research Center called a culture of volume of information and spin. I mean, don't forget your buyers. If you think about their waking hours every day, say it's like 15 hours of awake time, right? Whatever it is, they're dealing with a barrage of 24/7 news. I mean, the news cycle, and I don't know about you, but this week I'm like addicted. I refresh the New York Times. I'm addicted to knowing what is going on, what happened next. I mean, I got things to do. I got deadlines, but I'm not alone in the fact that we are addicted right now to checking the news. Wired magazine calls it the new FOMO, right? The new fear of missing out is actually our inability to stop checking the news. Today is a new headline every day. But this is not just us. This is every buyer on every side of the spectrum, right? Dealing with the 24/7 news cycle. So now take that time and that attention off the plate. And you've got even limited chunk of attention to go vie for. Go back to the fact that we had an incredible, catastrophic level of fake news and disinformation, right, that were levied in this country all over the world by bad actors trying to sway elections and politicize and create division. This is just fact. Doesn't matter, again, where you come from, where you approach the issue of politics. We're dealing with the fact that most people can't actually trust the information they are interacting with online. So forget getting their attention. How did you make sure that what you're saying can be trusted? I think that's the real way to look at, things like the attention economy. It's doubling down on making sure that the message you're coming across with is and can be trusted. For example, you have to showcase that what you're saying is relevant. And we use that word flippantly. The more relevant than what you are, the more you can show that you've taken the time to understand these buyers, the more they're going to go, okay, you've taken the time to get to know me. That's one measure towards me actually trusting you, right? Then we've got to be a little bit transparent. We've got to showcase to buyers that we are willing to give it all away, that we're not hiding anything, that we're willing to showcase everything we know in order to help them make a good decision. In other words, that whole, buzzword of thought leadership, that's what it means. It means giving everything you know out to the market so that when people are trying to make a decision, they can look to you as somebody who's willing to give it away because you're so confident in the quality of the insights that you bring to the table.
Right.
That's so important today, never more so than ever. And finally, we have to be willing to connect with people on a level that indicates that we understand them at a value level. Look at this, how we've brought this full circle, Carlos, right back to our femvertising and pride pandering. But this is why so many companies are dipping their toe into the waters of, showcasing feminism in their ads or LGBTQ diversity and inclusion. They're trying to connect with buyers on a level that goes well beyond what the product does. Sure. And that, of course, creates issues. But I think it's because of this need to forego just winning attention and also try to earn trust. It's an exciting, incredible new time to be a marketer. it's also a little bit overwhelming, because what we end up doing is overwhelming buyers with how important we think what we're saying to them is in the context of the culture of spin and volume of information that they're actually dealing with.
Well, and I think it's interesting you talk about trust, because I think trust is paramount. And I also believe we don't have a lot of cycles to try to win trust with customers, with buyers, because if we're just going to throw volume and volume and all it is irrelevant nonsense, you've lost my trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say lost your trust, but you've just deemed yourself not even worthy for me to explore if I can put my trust in you. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree with that?
Right. I agree 100%. I think that's what requires, I think, marketers today to be a little bit braver even than 10 years ago. We've got to be willing to kind of stand up to our organizations in a sense that we have to be willing to audit. And I don't just mean that checklist of like what's out of date and what's not on the right tone. I mean, really audit every single touch point we're providing, right? And audit the fact that does this communicate trust? Does this actually showcase that we can be trusted, or is this hyperbolic? Is it, again, full of irrelevant information? I mean, it's a new lens on the continual auditing that a marketer has to do. But what it's up against are entrenched ideas within a business that the way we've been doing it is good enough. And it ignores, again, that larger, broader context that a buyer is coming to the table with in favor of how things were 10 years ago, when there was a lot less out there, a lot more trust in vendors than there are today, overwhelmingly in business. So I think it's a new lens to look at the problem of not only what's on your website, but where does a buyer find us? How are they interacting with us in the wild, in the world? And what are we doing at every single touch point to demonstrate, again, that we can be transparent, we can be honest, we can almost be vulnerable as a business, and that we can showcase our humanity.
So with all of that, there is a lot there, right? So if we're going to go with a message, we sure as heck better make sure we can back it up as a company. Not just from a product perspective, but are we actually practicing what we preach?
Mm-hmm.
We have to understand our buyers. We have to dial in our content to make sure we're just not the drunk uncle at the cocktail party who's spewing nonsense. I mean, the list goes on. So if for those who are listening and they're sitting there going, I buy into all this, but you don't understand my situation. There's only so much time in the day and so many bodies to fill that time. Where the heck does someone start?
If you work in an organization that does not trust you as a marketer to do the right thing by your buyers, go quit and find a company that does. You are going to be wasting, and I know that's a really general.
I say that all the time, but I love that you just said that.
You're not going to get anywhere, right?
Right. Yes. I love that you just said that. I'm sorry, I interrupted, but go ahead. I was like pumping my fist over here.
That's a good sign. I'm sure I'm making other people listening on this podcast going, what the F? I can't quit my job. The fact is you can and you should. Marketing talent right now is so hard to find. And if you are actually good at what you do, you need to be willing to see yourself as an asset. But that asset cannot be leveraged unless you're in the kind of culture that trusts marketing. We all know that there are many businesses out there that look at marketing like a function of the business that can be deprioritized, right? I think people call it the arts and crafts department of yesteryear. The fact is you can do the work to drive change of the perception of marketing. In many organizations, that is an ongoing process. So marketers are starting to earn that kind of trust. They're showing impact. But in some cases, you're never going to change the minds of the people that are going to give you the freedom to actually do what's right for the business. And so I'm not saying this is a blanket advice that's good for everybody. Some people just need to keep their jobs, and that's fine. What I'm saying is if you're somebody who's fed up with the fact that you're getting nowhere, trying to, for example, shift the language of your website to focus more on the buyer and less on your products, if you fought that good fight for months and you're getting nowhere, go apply your talents to an organization that desperately needs that customer-centric, buyer-centric energy, because they're out there. Founders and CEOs and boards that get it are the ones that are looking for marketers to come in with a playbook that's suitable for 2020. If you want to go work for an organization that wants you to be a 1995 marketer, by all means, go for it. But, see you in 18 months when you've gotten nowhere.
I love that. That is such strong advice. And earlier in my career, when I was with a software company, I took the step, and yeah, it was scary as hell to say, I'm going to shift, I'm going to move because I can't stand doing this anymore. But man, the rewards are so much worth it. And I think that's part of, I know you see this too. I run into marketers all the time who are just, well, the marketing happiness report by Prof showed that only 10% say they're very fulfilled in your work. That's pathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
we do some really cool stuff, and you would think really only 9 out of 10 are not. I mean, I don't wake up every morning going, boy, I just want to be adequate.
I think it comes down to, and I realize that that's pretty hyperbolic to say, just quit your job and go work for a company. If you are doing the work to change the perception of marketing internally, you really do have to start speaking the language of the business. I don't just mean revenue. I actually mean, this is just kind of managing up 101, but really, laddering up whatever you're doing in marketing, even if it's this campaign to, increase trust in a business, you've got to ladder it up to higher level business goals and be able to change the way that you talk about marketing to be something that a CFO, a CEO, the head of sales are all going to nod their heads at and go, oh, right, you are creating value. You are creating brand value in a way that allows us to achieve what we're, trying to do. We're all kind of working on the same team. I think where marketers fall and trip is when I'll say we, because I am one, when we are a little too proud of what we do and we forget why we're doing it. We forget that we are a part of a team that is all trying to create the same kind of change in market. So we tend to maybe sometimes be a little proud and say, well, it's marketing. You don't understand it. The truth is everybody has an opinion about marketing. You know what they say about opinions.
Yes.
I'll wait, Alice. I'll wait. But everyone thinks that they understand marketing because they consume it all day. Everyone sees ads and billboards and commercials. They think they know what marketing is. So there is this like weird onus on marketing, like nowhere else in the business, to have to be this continual internal educator on what actually, marketing for that, especially in B2B specific organization, needs to look like. And the only way to do that is to connect with your colleagues in a way that you're connecting with your buyers, what matters to them, the language they use. Man, marketers have 2 jobs. We have to sell our value to the market and our organization. I love marketers for this reason. We're the most resilient people I've ever met.
Yeah, we're one of the few professions that constantly has to justify our internal existence.
Mm-hmm. But the ones that are doing it well, and they're creating incredible momentous change that is actually changing the role that a business plays in the life of a buyer. So, I mean, as hard as it is, I say keep pushing, keep going, because I'm excited about where marketing is headed. I'm excited about the profession of marketing compared to 100 years ago, what it was, manipulation, persuasion, right, to what it can be and what it should be, which are these like internal advocates for the buyer and connectors between what the market values and what we do as organizations. It's still a remarkable profession when we're willing to be courageous and do it the right way.
100% agree. I have often said there's no better time to be in marketing, because if we do it the right way, we can, and I'm with you, I think it's driving effectual change, and it's so vitally important. Katie, I know you and I could probably stay on the phone for several more hours and talk about this stuff. As my kids say, it's one of the things that I like to, quote, nerd out about. But if people want to continue the conversation with you, if they want to find you, learn more about what you do, where can they go?
I send a weekly newsletter that is humbly called the world's best newsletter. And I send it every Saturday morning. So if you want to get that, which I highly suggest you do, because I have a big announcement coming up in 2 weeks, which Carlos doesn't even know. So he's probably
going to say, this is news to me. This is fantastic. Bated breath.
Depending on when this podcast comes out, maybe out there. But the first people to know will be that newsletter. So Katie-Martell with 2 L's.com, or just Google me. Like a good marketer, I'm infinitely Googleable.
That is very true. Yes, you're very well known. So, Katie, I really do want to thank you. I know you've got a crazy busy schedule. This has been a lot of fun for me, and like every time we get to talk, I walk away with something to ponder and think about, and something to learn from. So I want to thank all of you who have listened to this episode of the B2B Growth Show, the hashtag H2H Human to Human segment. I am Carlos Hidalgo. Go out and sign up for Katie's newsletter. And while while you're at it, if you want to grab a copy of The Un-American Dream and learn how to establish work-life balance and shed the hustle, go to Amazon.com. Thank you so much. Katie, you have a wonderful afternoon. And to our listeners, have a great day and go drive some change.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big Three, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.